Clara Whitmore returned from the well and discovered a golden animal the size of a young horse asleep on her newly planted chamomile. It lay on its back with 4 muddy paws in the air, as if the flower bed had been planted for its personal comfort. One crushed blossom rested behind its ear. The animal looked peaceful. Clara's garden did not. She had moved into the little cottage at the edge of Silverpine territory 3 weeks earlier with crates of dried herbs and a firm intention to be left alone. The roof leaked, the chimney objected to north winds, and the garden had spent years losing an argument with weeds. No senior healer could take credit for her salves, and no elegant pack lady could ask whether low-ranked omegas were truly allowed to study medicine. Here, she could grow remedies and live where no one cared about her rank. Up close, Clara noticed a broad leather collar stamped with a silver crest she did not recognize. Clara set down the water bucket. "Move." One brown eye opened. "You are lying on 3 days of work." The eye closed. Clara approached cautiously. The animal resembled a royal wolfhound, though no ordinary hound should look that smug. She pushed his side. Nothing happened. She pushed harder. The dog sighed as if Clara had disappointed his ancestors. "Do not make that sound. This is my garden." His tail struck the earth once, flattening 2 young thyme plants. She offered a biscuit, threatened a bath, and informed him that chamomile made poor bedding. The hound accepted the biscuit without rising. Clara pulled his front leg. The dog rolled half an inch and became heavier. "You weigh more than my cottage." A whistle sounded beyond the hedge. The criminal sprang upright, shook mud across Clara, seized her glove, and bounded through the hedge. Clara stood among the ruins with 1 wet sleeve and only 1 glove. Then she followed. Clara had assumed the dark manor beyond the hedge was empty. The manor door opened before she knocked. The man there was tall enough to make the doorway seem poorly designed. He wore black, his dark hair was untidy, and a book remained open in one hand. He had a face made to intimidate council chambers and assessing gray eyes. Her omega instincts noticed his power before her mind did. Alpha. Something older and heavier pressed beneath his calm, making her wolf lower its head. Clara raised her chin. "Your dog destroyed my garden." The golden hound appeared behind the man's leg, still carrying her glove. The stranger looked at him, then at Clara, then back at the dog. "That seems unlikely." Clara stared. The dog sat and placed 1 enormous paw over the stolen evidence. Clara pointed out that Atlas was holding her glove. Lucien argued that many gloves looked similar. Even her embroidered initials, he decided, were an unfortunate coincidence. Clara had treated infected wounds and frightened children. Nothing had prepared her for a man denying a crime while the criminal chewed the evidence. When Clara mentioned the flattened chamomile, Lucien suggested the plants had been tired. She informed him that plants did not take naps. He admired her certainty. The corner of his mouth moved. Clara understood then. He was enjoying himself. Her anger sharpened into purpose. "I require an apology." "From me?" "From the dog." The stranger asked Atlas whether he regretted entering her garden. The hound yawned. "He appears conflicted," the man said. "He appears unrepentant." Clara stepped closer, though every sensible instinct informed her that advancing on an unknown dominant alpha was poor strategy. "Then you may apologize on his behalf." The man closed his book around 1 finger. Something almost warm entered his eyes. "I am sorry your plants failed to defend themselves," Clara inhaled. Atlas quietly picked up the glove again. Clara called him the worst neighbor she had ever met. Lucien noted that they had only just met, which meant, she replied, that he had established an impressive lead. That time the stranger did smile. It changed his face enough to be inconvenient. Clara pointed at Atlas. "Return it." The man gave a soft command. Atlas walked forward, placed the glove at Clara's feet, and added enough drool to make ownership debatable. "Excellent," Clara said. "A complete restoration of justice." She turned away. The man called after her for a name. Clara explained that she did not want him using it. He introduced himself as Lucien anyway. Clara kept walking. "My condolences." Behind her, the door remained open for several seconds. Inside the manor, Atlas looked up at his master. Lucien Vale, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, watched the furious Omega disappear. Amusement disturbed 4 years of carefully guarded loneliness. Atlas wagged his tail. Lucien reminded him that he had destroyed medicinal plants and stolen a glove. Atlas picked up a second glove from beneath the hall table. Lucien stared at it. The glove was gray. A small C had been sewn near the wrist. Atlas had apparently planned ahead. Lucien could have stopped him with one command. He did not. For 2 days, Clara saw neither Lucien nor his lawless animal. She replanted the chamomile, repaired the edge of the garden bed, and told herself she was relieved. On the 3rd morning, Atlas stole a stocking. Clara was grinding willow bark when her housekeeper, Nessa, entered carrying an empty clothespin. Nessa was 60, human, and unimpressed by supernatural authority. "There is a golden horse in the laundry," Nessa announced. Clara closed her eyes. By the time she reached the yard, Atlas had one of her stockings hanging from his mouth like a captured flag. "Drop it." He ran. Clara chased him through the hedge, across Lucien's lawn, around a stone fountain, and directly into the side of his owner. Lucien caught her by the shoulders before she fell. For one startled second, Clara was pressed against a hard chest scented with pine and alpha power. Her wolf became interested. Clara became furious with it. She stepped back. "Your dog stole my stocking." Lucien's gaze moved over her face. "Good morning." "It was until the theft." Atlas sat beside the fountain with the stocking. Lucien asked for proof, then argued that finding it on her laundry line established location rather than ownership. Clara stared hard enough to make a lesser man apologize to the entire female sex. "Give it back." He held out his hand. Atlas approached, considered the command, then placed the stocking in the fountain. Clara watched it sink. Lucien watched it sink. Atlas looked proud of solving the dispute. "I will replace it," Lucien said. "With what? A fishing net?" His mouth moved again. Clara retrieved the wet stocking and wrung it out over his boots. Over the next week, Atlas stole bread, a scarf, a basket, and 1 shoe, which was worse than stealing both because it showed planning. Every incident ended at Lucien's manor, where he called the evidence circumstantial, and every visit lasted longer than the one before it. Clara learned that Lucien read history and suspiciously sealed reports, drank tea without sugar, and listened with complete attention. He learned that she charged patients what they could afford, forgot meals, and spoke to Atlas like a dishonest shopkeeper. Atlas learned that theft produced biscuits. This encouraged him. By the 2nd week, the baker asked what Atlas had stolen each morning. The blacksmith started a betting pool, and children waited near the hedge. Clara denied that the situation was entertaining. No one believed her, especially Nessa. Nessa observed that Clara spent a great deal of time discussing the neighbor. Clara blamed the dog's crimes. Nessa suggested she stop rewarding those crimes with biscuits, and Clara called that unrelated. The next afternoon, Atlas arrived without stolen property. He sat in the center of Clara's herb garden, carefully avoiding the new chamomile. A folded note was tied to his collar. Clara regarded him with suspicion. "What have you done?" Atlas lifted one paw. She removed the note. "Your biscuits have created unrealistic expectations." Atlas rejected his breakfast and attempted to bury the cook's dignity beside the roses. "Please send the recipe." The message was signed only with an L. Clara read it twice, went inside, and wrote a reply. "The recipe is not responsible for your failure to discipline a creature who weighs more than most cabinets." She tied the answer to Atlas and sent him home. 20 minutes later, he returned. "The cabinets obey me," Clara answered immediately. "The cabinets are afraid of you. So are most sensible things. That does not include me." I had noticed. By the end of the week, Atlas carried arguments about bread, weather, and Lucien's opinion that Clara used too much lavender in sleep tea. Clara replied that anyone who slept as little as he did had forfeited the right to criticize. Neither acknowledged that they could simply walk through the hedge and speak. Atlas did not care. Each delivery earned him half a biscuit from Clara and praise from Lucien, who had become increasingly creative in pretending the correspondence was accidental. Then Atlas delivered Lucien's shirt. It was a black formal shirt made of fine linen, folded badly and attached to the dog's collar by one sleeve. Clara found the hound sitting outside her door at dawn. "No," Atlas wagged. "I am not participating in this." He wagged harder. Clara untied the shirt before he could drag it through mud. A silver wolf had been embroidered inside the collar, and the fabric smelled faintly of Lucien. Her wolf approved. Clara questioned its judgment. She crossed to the manor and knocked. Lucien answered, wearing dark trousers and an open coat over his bare chest. Clara forgot her speech. Scars crossed his shoulder and ribs. This was not the body of a quiet landowner. Lucien looked at the shirt in her hands. Then he looked at Atlas. "I have been searching for that." Clara recovered enough sense to hold it out. "Your dog brought it to my bedroom window. Perhaps he thinks you object to my wardrobe. I object to many things about you. Your shirts have escaped notice." His eyes warmed. "How fortunate." She pushed the garment against his chest. Her fingers brushed warm skin. Both went still as Alpha and Omega scent met between them. Clara's pulse jumped. Lucien's control closed like a door. He stepped back first. "Thank you." The sudden distance irritated her more than it should have. Clara ordered him to keep Atlas home. Lucien promised a firm conversation, then weakened his case by calling the rose-destroying hound sensitive. Atlas was at that moment digging up a rosebush. Clara pointed. Lucien looked over her shoulder. "He expresses sensitivity through gardening." She laughed before she could stop herself, and Lucien's expression softened. Clara handed him the shirt and retreated through the hedge with more speed than dignity. Behind her, Lucien accused Atlas of planning the encounter. The hound looked at his open coat, then toward the hedge with obvious disbelief. Lucien had commanded armies that questioned him less. Clara tried to restore distance. She stopped answering notes for an entire morning. She returned Atlas's deliveries without comment. When Lucien appeared at the village market, she became deeply interested in onions. This would have worked better if Lucien had not stood beside the onion stall. "Are they particularly fascinating?" he asked. Clara examined one as if it contained ancient prophecy. "They are honest. They make people cry and do not pretend innocence afterward." Lucien called honesty rare. Clara said Atlas lacked it. Lucien defended the dog on technical grounds. Atlas never claimed innocence. He simply believed rules applied to smaller animals. The market swirled around them with carts, wool, vegetables, and villagers pretending not to listen. Even in an ordinary coat, Lucien made crowds create space. Clara wondered again what kind of landowner carried that much power. Before she could ask, shouting rose near the grain wagons. A merchant gripped an old Omega's wrist beside a broken honey jar. He blamed her and demanded 3 silver coins. The woman trembled. Her son worked in distant logging camps. She had no mate, no rank, and no one nearby appeared eager to challenge a broad-shouldered stranger. Clara set down the onion. Lucien was already moving. He did not raise his voice. He did not bare his teeth. He simply stopped in front of the merchant and looked at the hand gripping the woman's wrist. "Release her!" The merchant turned, ready to argue. Then he met Lucien's eyes. Power entered the square like winter entering an open house. The man's fingers opened at once. Lucien crouched beside the broken jar. He examined the table, the cartwheel, and the dark stain on the merchant's sleeve. Lucien explained that the merchant had knocked down his own jar. The honey on his cuff proved he had tried to catch it. When challenged, Lucien simply reminded him that wolves had noses. The beta merchant's face changed when he realized every wolf could smell the same facts. Apparently, fraud worked better without witnesses who had noses. Lucien stood. "You will apologize. Then you will give her an unbroken jar for frightening her." "I will not." Lucien's eyes flashed silver. The command that followed was quiet. "You will." The merchant obeyed. Clara felt the order in her bones, even though it was not directed at her. So did every wolf in the square. Conversation stopped. Heads lowered instinctively. Lucien seemed to notice his mistake. The silver vanished, and he stepped away before anyone could question him. Clara followed him behind the bakery. "What are you?" He kept walking, a poor market companion apparently. "That was a royal command." Lucien stopped. The alley smelled of bread and wood smoke. Beyond it, the market slowly resumed, but several wolves were whispering. "You are mistaken. I trained at the capital clinic. I treated soldiers after border fights. I know what command feels like." His face became unreadable. "Then you know some questions create danger." Clara folded her arms. "That is not an answer. It is the only one I can give." She should have been frightened. Instead, she was disappointed. For 2 weeks, he had asked about her work, her childhood, and why she left the clinic. He knew her mother's name. He knew Clara feared deep water and hated cooked carrots. Yet every answer about him ended at a locked door. Clara accused him of learning everything he wanted about her while revealing nothing. Lucien disagreed, though the dog-assisted investigation of her clothing weakened his position. A guilty movement crossed his face. Clara noticed. Under pressure, Lucien admitted that he had encouraged some thefts. The first glove and stocking belonged entirely to Atlas. The scarf involved what he called shared responsibility. Clara stared, then laughed despite herself. "You are impossible." Lucien had been called worse than impossible, usually by counselors rather than women whose laundry he stole. The word escaped before he could stop it. Clara caught it, but a bell rang across the square before she could press him further. Someone shouted that a child was missing. 6-year-old Tessa Harper had vanished near the eastern path. Storm clouds gathered above woods broken by fern-hidden ravines. Moonridge formed search groups while Clara packed bandages, warming herbs, and sweet tea. Lucien called Atlas. The playful thief became a trained hound, pleased to discover one legal use for trespassing. Lucien knelt and gave him Tessa's scarf. Atlas drew in the scent, circled once, then pulled toward the trees. Clara announced that she was coming. Lucien refused until she pointed out that a storm made local knowledge more useful, not less. Lucien ordered her to stay with the mother. Clara objected to the tone that expected the world to arrange itself around his decisions. Thunder rolled. Atlas barked once and tugged against his lead. Lucien looked from the dog to Clara. He appeared to understand that arguing would waste the light. Stay close. Ask politely. His eyes narrowed. Atlas barked again. Please stay close. Better. They entered the woods together. Rain darkened the path. Atlas moved quickly with his nose low, following Tessa beyond the marked trail. Clara led them around a marsh. Lucien lifted a fallen branch and offered his hand when the ground steepened. She took it without discussing the warmth that traveled up her arm. They found Tessa's ribbon beside a stream. The water had risen over the stepping stones. Clara's fear tightened around her ribs. Years earlier, floodwater had taken her younger brother. She knew how quickly a harmless stream could become a wall. Lucien smelled the change in her scent. At the flooded stream, Lucien again told Clara to stay behind. She again refused, reminding him that the child might be injured, and that repetition did not improve royal strategy. His face showed conflict, but he nodded. They crossed with Lucien upstream, breaking the current, while Clara kept one hand locked around his belt. Atlas swam beside them and shook himself directly onto both humans. When they reached the far bank, Lucien wiped water from his face. He did that deliberately. Now you understand my life. Atlas sneezed and continued. They found Tessa alive beneath a fallen pine, her ankle trapped between rocks. Clara calmed her and checked the swelling. Lucien shifted the heavier rock enough for Clara to free her. When Tessa saw Atlas, she wrapped both arms around his wet neck. I knew the golden wolf would find me. He is a dog, Lucien said. Atlas looked offended. Clara wrapped the child in her cloak. Today he may be whatever he wants. The journey back was slower. Lucien carried Tessa against his chest. Clara walked beside him with one hand on Atlas's collar whenever the path narrowed. At the flooded stream, Lucien crossed first with the child, then returned for Clara. I can walk. I know. He lifted her anyway. Clara's arms went around his neck by instinct. The water struck his thighs, but he did not slip. His alpha power curled around them, steady and protective rather than commanding. For one dangerous moment, she allowed herself to rest against him. Atlas carried Clara's medicine bag without dropping it in the water. His sudden professionalism was deeply alarming. The whole village waited at the forest edge. Tessa's mother ran forward with a cry. Relief broke across the crowd as Lucien placed the child in her arms, and Clara explained the ankle would heal. Then 6 mounted wolves thundered into the square. Atlas's scent had led them from a stolen dispatch boot to the manor, and villagers had directed them toward the search. They wore black armor marked with the silver crown of the Northern Territories. Their commander dismounted before the horse had fully stopped. She was tall, gray-haired, and armed with enough knives to settle most discussions. She crossed the muddy road, dropped to one knee in front of Lucien, and bowed her head. Your Majesty. Silence took the village. The baker dropped a lantern. The blacksmith whispered a word unsuitable for children. Clara looked at Lucien, who still held Tessa's red ribbon in one hand. Atlas sat beside the Alpha King and wagged his tail. The dog, at least, believed the introduction had gone perfectly. Clara had imagined discovering Lucien's secret in several ways. None involved mud in her boots, rain in her hair, and half the village staring at her because she had ordered the Alpha King to ask politely. The commander rose. Her expression moved from Lucien to Clara, to Clara's missing cloak around Tessa, and finally to Atlas carrying the medicine bag. The commander reported 9 days of unanswered messages and increasingly unreasonable searches. Lucien insisted that he had left instructions. She clarified that a note demanding silence looked more like evidence of abduction. Lucien called the council dramatic. The commander looked at Atlas. Your hound stole a royal dispatch rider's boot and returned alone. Drama was reasonable. Atlas turned his head away. Clara almost laughed. Then she remembered Lucien was a king and became angry again. The villagers began bowing in confused stages. Some lowered their heads, others dropped to their knees. The baker attempted both and nearly fell over the broken lantern. Lucien's mouth tightened. Stand up, he told them. The child has been found. That is what matters. His command was gentler this time, but everyone obeyed. Clara did not. She walked home. Atlas followed. No, she told him. He continued, Go sit beside your dishonest king. Atlas looked back at Lucien, then chose Clara. This did not improve Lucien's position. He caught up near the hedge. The royal guards followed at a careful distance, visibly fascinated by the sight of their king pursuing an Omega healer while his dog carried her bag. Clara, Your Majesty. He flinched. It was small, but she saw it. Lucien asked Clara not to call him Majesty. She pointed out that everyone else had to, and everyone else had known who he was. Lucien glanced toward the guards. Their commander immediately became interested in a tree. They knew because they work for me. Atlas knew. The hound wagged. Atlas cannot speak. That is the first advantage you have found in him. Clara took her medicine bag from the dog and entered her garden. Lucien stopped at the broken gate, exactly where she had once told him not to enter without invitation. He remembered boundaries even now. That made anger less convenient. I did not come here to deceive you, he said. Why did you come? He looked toward the manor beyond the hedge. Because kings are never alone, I wanted to discover whether loneliness was better. The answer was too honest to dismiss. Clara folded her arms. Lucien explained that his father and brother had died during a rebellion, leaving him a crown, endless advisors, and friendships that quickly became political. His mother's empty manor had offered rare silence. Then Atlas destroyed Clara's garden. Lucien admitted encouraging several later thefts, including the scarf, basket, and one shoe. At first, he had wanted another argument. Later, he had simply wanted to see her. Clara observed that normal men knocked. Lucien observed that she would not have welcomed him. She agreed, leaving Atlas with the better results. The dog sat between them, pleased by recognition. Clara reminded Lucien that withholding a crown was still lying. He accepted the charge and apologized without dressing it in royal language. Clara told him the apology fixed nothing and asked for time. Lucien gave it without negotiation. The commander cleared her throat. Your Majesty, the council also requires some of your time. The council has had 4 years. The Eastern delegation arrives tomorrow. Something changed in his expression. Clara noticed. What delegation? Nothing that concerns you. The words landed badly. Lucien knew it at once. Clara's chin lifted. Of course, I am merely the neighbor whose laundry participated in royal entertainment. That is not what I meant. Return to your council. She closed the gate. Atlas remained inside the garden. Lucien looked at him. Come. The hound put his head on his paws. The Alpha King issued a sharper command. Atlas rolled onto his back. The commander studied the sky. Clara opened the gate just enough to let the dog through. Atlas refused until she promised him a biscuit the next day. Lucien's guards witnessed the ruler of 7 packs wait while an Omega negotiated visitation terms with his hound. By sunset, every soldier at the manor knew. By morning, so did the royal kitchen. The Eastern delegation arrived in polished carriages led by Lady Seraphine of Eastcliff, a beautiful, high-ranked alpha daughter whose horse looked diplomatically valuable. Rumors immediately connected her unmarried status to Lucien's. Clara tried not to care until Atlas appeared carrying Seraphine's green silk glove. She marched it back to the manor and informed the guards that the royal hound had expanded into international crime. Seraphine accepted the glove with humor, while Lucien appeared in formal black and a crown. He looked every inch a king until Atlas wiped a muddy nose across his coat. Seraphine quickly identified Clara as the healer whose opinions had interrupted Lucien's negotiations. Then she casually mentioned the proposed royal union. Clara left before her expression betrayed her. That evening, Atlas delivered Lucien's explanation. Seraphine had come to negotiate grain and reject the match. Lucien intended to reject it as well. Clara replied, "Perhaps she has met you." His answer returned immediately. "She has." Her refusal was detailed. Clara smiled, then asked what happened when the council found another suitable woman. "They already have," Lucien wrote. No explanation followed. Across the hedge, he sat before a blank sheet, unable to write that the council's unsuitable choice and his own chosen woman were the same person. 3 mornings later, Atlas delivered a tooth-marked royal summons asking Clara to advise the council on Western medicine. Lucien had added that this was real work, not a trick to lure her through the hedge. She attended for the villages, not because Atlas had bumped Lucien's pen and damaged the royal signature. Blackthorn Manor had transformed into guarded halls and map-covered rooms crowded with regional alphas who believed furniture should respect rank. Conversation stopped when Clara entered. Several alphas looked as though low rank might be contagious. Her plain gray dress and lack of pack jewels announced her low rank. Several counselors scented the air until Lucien's silver eyes reminded them of their manners. "Miss Whitmore has treated remote communities for 6 years," he said. "She will advise us on winter medicine." Lord Fenwick objected that royal physicians had already submitted estimates. Clara exposed an outdated census, contaminated wells, and supplies that would last 9 days. Within an hour, 3 orders had changed, and Fenwick was asking her to review the clinic budget. Lucien watched with the satisfaction of a man winning an argument without having to participate. Clara noticed and refused to be pleased. The meeting ended near noon. As counselors gathered their papers, Fenwick approached Lucien. He spoke softly, but Clara was close enough to hear. "Competent, certainly. Still, competence does not resolve the other concern." Lucien's expression cooled. "There is no other concern. The succession cannot remain unsettled. If Eastcliff is refused, the council needs a candidate the Pax will accept. A temporary public courtship may calm the territories while a formal choice is made." Clara stopped packing. Fenwick lowered his voice further. "The healer could serve if managed carefully. The people enjoy humble stories. Later, a more suitable queen can be announced." Lucien rose so quickly that his chair struck the wall. Power crashed through the chamber. Fenwick went pale. Clara did not wait to hear the answer. She closed her satchel and left through the side door. Atlas blocked the garden path and became an emotional barricade with fur. Clara's burning eyes only made her angrier. Lucien's voice came from behind them. "Atlas, release her!" The dog obeyed at once. Clara continued walking. Lucien asked her to hear his answer, not merely Fenwick's insult. The council wanted peace without courage, he said, and he would not purchase it with her dignity. She turned. "Would you have told me?" "Yes." "When?" Before or after I became a useful, humble story? Lucien's face changed as if she had struck him. Lucien ordered her never to call herself a useful, humble story. Clara noted that his lord had done so easily. Lucien replied that Fenwick no longer spoke for the council. Lucien stepped closer but kept space between them. He proposed a false courtship because he believes every relationship is a tool. I refused before you entered this house. I refused again after you left the room. He will return to his territory without his advisory seat. Clara reminded him that the Pax expected a high-ranked queen. Lucien called their expectations tiresome. Clara reminded him that a king could not hide beside her hedge forever. She also refused to become a joke tolerated until someone suitable arrived. Lucien promised she would not. Lucien drew a breath. Clara, the council's list stopped mattering before I knew your surname. She went still. The king who could silence a square now struggled to find one sentence. Atlas whined. Clara suggested that he send a note if speech had defeated him. Lucien had tried, but the missing next line was the alarming confession that the council's other lady was Clara. Someone behind the open windows dropped a pen. Every listening face vanished. Clara protested that 3 weeks was too soon for such a decision. Lucien called it a discovery rather than a decision, and described her as a severe problem. Atlas sat between them like a witness who had eaten the evidence. Lucien admitted that before her, he had understood his life even when he disliked it. Now he left council meetings wondering whether her roof still leaked. Her roof did still leak. Lucien knew because his anonymous repairman had been chased away after announcing royal concern about her tiles. Even Lucien admitted that he had panicked. Clara laughed. The sound escaped through the crack in her anger. Lucien stepped closer. I do not want a temporary courtship. I do not want a suitable queen selected from a ledger. I want to know whether there is any chance that, after I have apologized enough, you might permit me to court you honestly. Clara's heart made a foolish movement. Without theft? Lucien could promise not to order further theft. Clara found that guarantee suspiciously narrow. He considered it the strongest available while Atlas remained alive. Atlas wagged. Clara studied the muddy-booted king who had crossed floodwater for a child and removed a counselor for suggesting she could be managed. The danger was not his power. It was how much she trusted his restraint. You may court me, she said. Lucien went still when she permitted the courtship. He had expected more resistance. Clara offered to withdraw permission, producing a royal no strong enough to rattle the windows. The word carried enough royal command to make the windows tremble. Clara raised one eyebrow. Lucien corrected himself. Please do not. Better. Atlas leaped up, seized the end of Lucien's ceremonial sash, and ran. The Alpha King was pulled sideways before he caught himself. From inside the manor came a muffled sound as the entire council failed to suppress laughter. Lucien closed his eyes. Clara smiled. Your courtship has begun well. Lucien approached courtship like a military campaign, beginning with enough roses to occupy Clara's kitchen. She informed him that she grew plants and did not require an army of them. Jewelry and a grand carriage failed next. On the 4th day, he arrived with bread, cheese, apples, and no ceremony. They ate beside the herb garden while Atlas slept across their feet. It was his best attempt. Lucien began visiting without royal clothing. He helped with herbs, repaired fences, and read beneath the apple tree while she worked. The villagers adjusted quickly. Moonridge had spent years without entertainment. An Alpha King attempting ordinary courtship provided enough for an entire winter. The baker offered advice, the blacksmith asked whether Clara had accepted him yet, and children sang that the king had lost his heart and one stocking. Lucien could not punish an entire village without proving them right. Clara enjoyed this more than was kind. Seraphine remained to finish the grain treaty and became Clara's friend after confessing that Lucien once gave porridge a time limit. Lucien heard the criticism. Seraphine considered that a benefit. Courtship might have remained peaceful if the royal council had not announced the harvest assembly. Every northern pack would send representatives to Blackthorn Keep. Lucien was expected to return publicly after his unexplained absence and present the winter treaties. He also intended to present Clara as the woman he was courting. Clara initially refused to attend. Rumors were easier than standing beneath the inspection of high-ranked wolves. Lucien told her she could stay away without disappointing him. That freedom changed her answer. She would not let the court decide what she was without meeting her. Preparations began immediately. Seraphine and Nessa found Clara a dark blue gown with hidden pockets for medicine. Nobles, Clara explained, often fainted near attention. Lucien sent a silver necklace bearing the northern wolf crest. Clara returned it. He came through the hedge carrying the box. Lucien insisted that the necklace was not a claim. Clara estimated that it could purchase 3 clinics. His correction to 2 did not improve matters. He opened the box. The pendant was smaller than she expected. An old silver wolf curled around a sprig of mountain thyme. "It belonged to my mother," he said. "She wore it when she traveled without the crown." Clara's refusal disappeared. "You should have started with that." "I am learning." He fastened it around her neck. His fingers brushed the sensitive skin at her nape, and both their wolves became very attentive. Lucien lowered his hands slowly. "There is another matter." Clara turned. Lucien warned that the assembly would eventually expect a mating mark. Clara appreciated the word eventually. Lucien agreed, although his wolf did not. Clara's wolf considered this and became unhelpfully sympathetic. She stepped closer. "Then your wolf may learn patience beside the dog." Atlas, sleeping by the stove, opened one eye. Lucien called, waiting beside Atlas Cruel. Clara asked which male he meant. "Apparently both." Clara smiled and kissed his cheek. The Alpha King stopped breathing. She walked away before he recovered. Atlas rose, approached Lucien, and sniffed the exact place her lips had touched. "Do not," Lucien warned. The dog licked his face. Clara laughed so hard she had to hold the table. Weeks later, Clara traveled north with Lucien for the harvest assembly. Blackthorn Keep was filled with banners, music, perfume, and enough rank to make its walls uneasy. Clara entered on Lucien's arm. Conversation softened around them. She felt every gaze. Strangers were curious, Moonridge approved, council families calculated, and several high-ranked women displayed open disdain. Sensing her tension, Lucien offered to leave his own assembly. Clara reminded him that hosts could not escape. He considered that a technical inconvenience and noted that his last disappearance had improved council productivity. Clara smiled despite herself. The formal presentation went well for nearly 11 minutes. Then Atlas entered the ballroom wearing Lucien's crown. No one knew how he had acquired it. The crown sat crooked between his ears, one silver point tangled in golden fur. A length of ceremonial cloth trailed behind him. 2 guards followed at a run, both trying to preserve royal dignity without tackling the royal hound. Atlas crossed the polished floor directly toward Clara. The ballroom watched. He sat on the hem of her gown. Lucien stared at his dog. Clara stared at the crown. Lord Fenwick, present only because removing him from council had not removed his invitation, whispered that the spectacle was disgraceful. Atlas heard him. The hound seized the trailing ceremonial cloth, turned, and ran between Fenwick's legs. The former counselor fell into a decorative arrangement of autumn branches. Silence held for one perfect second. Lady Seraphine laughed first, then the Moonridge baker, then half the ballroom. Lucien took the crown from Atlas and placed it on a horrified guard's cushion. "Increase security around the royal chambers," he said. The guard bowed. "Yes, your majesty, and give Atlas no pastries." The dog looked betrayed. Clara knelt to untangle the cloth from his collar. "You stole a crown." Atlas licked her chin. Lucien told Clara not to reward the crown thief. She denied doing so. Her smile weakened the denial, especially because Atlas considered everything a reward. Around them, the tension broke. Guests who had been preparing to judge Clara were now debating whether the dog had committed treason. By midnight, she had treated one fainting noble and convinced 3-pack leaders to fund clean wells. Her sleeves caused no political collapse. Lucien watched her move through the ballroom with quiet pride. When the musicians began a slower dance, he held out his hand. Lucien politely requested a dance. Clara praised him for remembering manners before his entire kingdom. He credited strict training. They danced beneath the winter chandeliers. Clara stepped on his boot twice, once accidentally, and once because he looked too satisfied. For the first time, the crown seemed less like a wall and more like another difficult object in Lucien's life, slightly less troublesome than Atlas. Clara tested "Your Majesty" against his ear. His hand tightened at her waist until she corrected it to Lucien. Better. Atlas barked from beside the musicians. He had acquired one of the drummer's sticks. The dance ended early. Winter arrived gently at first. Frost silvered Clara's garden. Smoke curled above Moonridge roofs. Lucien returned to Blackthorn Keep for several days each week, but he came back to the manor whenever duty allowed. Sometimes he arrived in a royal carriage. Sometimes he rode alone. Once Atlas arrived first, carrying a council document marked confidential. Clara did not read it. Nessa did, but only because the dog dropped it face up beside the stove. The relationship grew in ordinary spaces. Lucien learned to chop herbs without pulverizing the table. Clara learned that he became silent when worried and sarcastic when exhausted. He told her about his brother. She told him about the clinic physician who had dismissed her research until a high-ranked healer repeated it. They argued about money, security, and whether royal guards were necessary outside her cottage. Clara won the first two. Lucien quietly placed guards near the road anyway. Atlas won everything else. The final trouble began with a red ribbon. Clara found it tied around Atlas's collar with a sealed invitation to Blackthorn Keep. The Midwinter Council would formally recognize the treaties and announce changes to the royal household. Lucien had asked her to attend weeks earlier. She had agreed. Then Nessa mentioned that 2 royal seamstresses had arrived in Moonridge asking about Clara's measurements. Clara became suspicious. At the keep, servants hurried through corridors carrying white flowers and silver cloth. A jeweler left the royal study. The chapel had been opened and heated despite not being used for years. Every person Clara questioned smiled too quickly. She found Seraphine near the council chamber. "What is happening?" Seraphine blamed the suspicious preparations on indoor winter and northern architecture. Under pressure, she confessed that Nessa had threatened her into silence. This provided no useful distinction. Clara reached the council chamber and heard voices beyond the half-open door. Fenwick had returned to petition the regional alphas. His tone was unmistakable. "The king cannot announce a permanent bond without full council approval. The Omega has no pack alliance, no noble blood, and no preparation for queenship. Another voice argued that the people supported Clara. Fenwick dismissed popularity as temporary. If Lucien insisted, the council could recognize her as a royal companion while postponing any formal mating. Clara stood very still. Then Lucien spoke. "You misunderstand the decision before you." His voice carried the cold authority that had once frightened an entire market. "The council is not deciding whether Clara Whitmore is worthy of becoming queen. I am deciding whether this council is worthy of serving her." No one answered, Lucien continued. Clara had improved winter medicine, exposed false census records, and secured funding for wells without requesting title or reward. She had served northern people long before its lords learned her name. Her birth does not diminish her. Your inability to see beyond it diminishes you. Clara's anger changed shape. Inside, Fenwick attempted one last objection. "And if she refuses the crown?" Lucien was silent for a moment. "Then she refuses. I will not command the choice." Clara pushed open the door. The chamber turned toward her. Lucien stood at the head of the table in formal black, his crown before him rather than on his head. For once, surprise defeated his composure. "How much did you hear?" "Enough." Fenwick rose. "Miss Whitmore, this discussion is private." Atlas slipped through the door behind Clara, walked to Fenwick's chair, and took his glove. Clara looked at the hound. "Not yet." Atlas dropped it reluctantly. She faced the council. "Lord Fenwick is correct about one thing. I have no preparation for queenship." Fenwick looked relieved too soon. "But neither did Lucien when he inherited the crown," Clara continued. "He learned. I can learn. What I will not learn is how to become quiet enough for this room." Seraphine smiled. The gray-haired Commander Elowin hid her approval badly. Clara looked at Lucien. "Was there something you intended to ask me?" He glanced toward the flowers, the open chapel, and finally Atlas. Lucien admitted that the proposal had been planned for the garden. Clara observed that his secrets remained poorly supervised. He had noticed. Lucien came around the table. The council watched as their Alpha King stopped before a low-ranked Omega in a blue winter dress. He did not kneel. Clara was glad. She did not want submission from him, only honesty. He took her hand. "I spent most of my life believing control could prevent loss," he said. "Then a dog ignored a hedge, and you ignored every reason to fear me." Atlas wagged at the mention of himself. Lucien praised her for challenging him and improving his kingdom, though she had also threatened his boots with fever tonic. Clara maintained that he had deserved it. He agreed. A few counselors smiled. Lucien's thumb moved over her knuckles. "I do not ask you to become smaller for the crown. I ask whether you will stand beside me and help me make it better." Clara's wolf pressed close beneath her skin, warm and certain. "And the mating bond?" Lucien promised that the mating bond would happen only by her choice. The courtship could be permanent if she allowed it. Clara then asked the more difficult question, "What happened to the dog?" Lucien looked at Atlas. The hound had quietly stolen Fenwick's other glove. "Regrettably permanent." Clara smiled. "Then yes." For one heartbeat, the Alpha King looked as if he had forgotten every language. Then he pulled her into his arms. The kiss was not formal. It was not cautious. Months of restrained scent and interrupted moments broke at once, warm and fierce enough to make the council suddenly interested in its documents. Atlas barked. Elowin applauded. Seraphine joined her. Within seconds, the whole chamber was clapping except Fenwick, who was searching beneath the table for his gloves. Lucien rested his forehead against hers, still surprised by her answer. Clara reminded him that although she had rejected the roses, she had accepted the lunch. He should have understood the distinction. Atlas pushed between them, carrying both gloves and a length of white ribbon stolen from the chapel decorations. Clara looked at the ribbon, then at Lucien. Clara asked whether the stolen white ribbon had been intended for that day. Lucien promised that only the proposal had been scheduled while the ceremony waited for spring. Clara narrowed her eyes. Lucien added quickly, "If you approve." "Better." Fenwick reached for his gloves. Atlas ran. The council doors flew open, and the royal hound charged through Blackthorn Keep, trailing white ribbon, 2 gloves, and the last fragments of Lord Fenwick's dignity. The northern packs approved Clara by a margin large enough to embarrass her opponents. Moonridge celebrated for 3 days, and the baker won the betting pool by predicting that Atlas would steal something during the proposal. Their mating ceremony took place in Clara's garden after the chamomile returned. They rejected the cathedral and 300 distant relatives in favor of friends, pack leaders, Moonridge villagers, and every child Atlas had allowed to feed him. Clara wore white and the silver time pendant. Lucien wore black without a crown. Atlas wore blue ribbon. For most of the ceremony, he behaved perfectly. This should have warned everyone. When Lucien began the vow, Atlas seized the ceremonial sash and ran through the herb garden. The wedding chased him to the manor fountain, where he dropped it into the water exactly as he had dropped Clara's stocking. Lucien claimed he had matured since then. It had been 6 months. Laughing, Clara watched him retrieve the dripping sash and tie it around their joined hands. "Where were we?" he asked. The priest checked his notes. Clara looked into Lucien's gray eyes. "You were promising to love me despite my unsuitable sleeves." "I was promising to love you because you threatened me over flowers." "That too." They completed the vows. When Lucien marked her, he did so gently, with one hand cradling the back of her neck, and his power lowered until the choice belonged entirely to her. Clara accepted him. Their bond opened like warmth through a winter house. He felt her joy, stubbornness, and one clear warning that another 12 dozen roses would send him to sleep in the council chamber. Lucien smiled against her skin. Understood. The guests applauded. Atlas barked as if he had personally completed the bond. In fairness, he believed he had. 5 years after Atlas destroyed the chamomile, Queen Clara Vale was attempting to approve a public health budget. This would have been easier if the Alpha King were not searching beneath her desk. "What did you lose?" she asked. Lucien emerged, holding one boot and searching for the other. Clara asked whether he had checked the fountain. He had, twice. Blackthorn Keep had changed during Clara's years as queen. It held a public clinic, honest village records, children in once silent halls, and herbs in the courtyard. More cupboards had locks, but this had not stopped Atlas. At 11, he moved slowly and stole selectively. Their 4-year-old daughter entered the study wearing Lucien's missing boot on one foot. "Papa, Atlas gave me this." Lucien looked at the dog sleeping beside the fire. Atlas did not open his eyes. "Did he?" Princess Mira nodded. She had Clara's hair, Lucien's eyes, and enough alpha command to obtain cake from palace guards. "He said I could keep it." Clara set down her report. "Atlas said that?" "With his face." This was accepted evidence in the royal household. Lucien removed the boot from his daughter and found a biscuit inside. The 3 humans looked at one another while Atlas slept like an animal disappointed by his accomplices. "Return the kitchen biscuits," Clara said. Mira considered using royal command. Her mother's raised eyebrow changed her strategy. "Yes, Mama." She ran out. Lucien complained that Mira had blamed the dog. Clara called it political education. Each parent blamed the other's influence. He leaned over and kissed her temple. Their bond had deepened into constant warmth, carrying his amusement and the happiness he still felt whenever he found her in a room. When Lucien asked about the budget, Clara reported that the council had reduced rural medicine and that she had already restored it. Of course she had. Outside, Mira claimed Atlas had stolen the ribbon she was visibly holding. He had stolen it emotionally. Lucien blamed Clara's influence. Clara blamed his excuses. Atlas rose slowly, stretched, and walked to Clara. He placed his broad head on her knee, his muzzle now pale with age. She scratched behind his ears. "You caused all of this." His tail moved once. Lucien rested an arm around her shoulders. "He will become unbearable if you credit him." "Become?" Atlas lifted his head and dropped something onto Clara's papers. It was a gray gardening glove, faded and carefully preserved. A small C remained visible near the wrist. Clara stared. "I thought this was lost." Lucien became very still. Clara realized Atlas had taken both gloves on the first day. Lucien admitted discovering the second one later. The dangerous question was how much later. Lucien considered the value of honesty after 5 years of mating. That evening, Clara narrowed her eyes. Lucien had intended to return it. Clara questioned the 5-year delay. According to him, events had developed. Atlas wagged, delighted that an old crime remained effective. Clara picked up the glove. It smelled faintly of cedar from storage and carried one golden hair. Clara accused him of building a courtship on stolen property. Lucien blamed the chamomile for failing to defend itself. She struck his shoulder with the glove. Lucien caught her wrist, pulled her into his lap, and kissed her until the health budget slid to the floor. Atlas watched with satisfaction. From the corridor, Mira announced that Mama and Papa were being embarrassing again. The Alpha King lifted his head. Lucien accused Clara's daughter of spying. Clara corrected the ownership. Mira had inherited his command and, in his opinion, Clara's excuses. Mira entered, climbed onto the chair beside them, and offered Atlas the biscuit she had supposedly returned. The old hound accepted it. Clara looked at the king who once preferred loneliness, the princess negotiating with stolen food, and the dog who treated rules as suggestions. She had sought quiet, and instead found a kingdom worth challenging, and a mate who still crossed the hedge instead of using the gate. Lucien asked whether Clara regretted their first door-side argument. She reminded him that she had knocked to threaten legal action against the dog. Lucien still claimed Atlas had diplomatic immunity and that the flowers were only allegedly crushed. Clara laughed. Atlas rested on her knee while Mira leaned against Lucien. Winter sunlight touched the reports, biscuits, and battered glove that had started everything. Some love stories began with moonlight, destiny, or a sacred bond recognized at first sight. Theirs began with flattened chamomile, stolen laundry, and an Alpha King who had discovered that sending his enormous dog through a hedge was easier than admitting he wanted company. It had been a terrible plan. It had worked perfectly. Atlas closed his eyes among the family he had assembled one stolen object at a time. His tail tapped with the satisfaction of a criminal who knew he would never be convicted. Thank you for listening. If this story grabbed your heart, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss our next story. We'll see you in the next one.